From Energy.Media, this is Energy Superheroes with Peter Perry. Hey, everybody. Welcome today to the Energy Superheroes podcast. I'm excited to have James Ellsmoor from Island Innovation, and he specializes in sustainable development for islands globally. He really knows a lot about the island markets in particular. He's going to bring a lot to the table today, talking about energy and islands and how that may give us a glimpse into the future of what the rest of us can expect here on the mainland. So, James, it's great to have you today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, nice to be here.
So, I want to start off, broadly and talk about in general how you feel that islands can optimize not just their electrical grid, but beyond that. I know you cover waste management and other areas of islands, including tourism. So, for anyone who's in the audience today that may be a policymaker at an island or involved in um, energy on islands or sustainable development, how can you help them?
Mhm. A big part of this for us is sharing information and case studies. What we found is often islands, communities, governments, stakeholders are working in isolation and not necessarily aware of what is happening in other places. And our network is interesting because we have islands from the Arctic to the Caribbean, to Patagonia, South Pacific, etc. So really, really broad. And clearly, some of the small islands off the coast of Maine with a few hundred people are very different to Fiji. There's no question of that. But particularly in the energy context or electricity context, there are some big commonalities. So things like electric vehicles are a huge conversation. Things like renewables and microgrids are really there across the spectrum. And so we exist really just to help make these connections and share information. And with a small island community, all of these things are linked. So you can't talk about electricity without talking about tourism or transportation or waste management, because there's no they're not big enough to be able to segregate all those things into separate silos.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. One area that we've had a lot of interest in lately that's sort of come about is this new ESG trend in relation to investment specifically. So our audience has grown a bit, and I know there's a lot of finance people in the audience. I'm sure they'd love to know, in terms of financing these types of projects, any experience you could share related to that.
The really interesting thing in many islands is that when you look at the generation costs, that, as I said, maybe 3, 4, 5 times higher in, say, the Caribbean than in Florida, um, that would seem like a no-brainer, right? To move towards those kind of investments. The problem is scale, and particularly also the number of jurisdictions. So I lose count of how many jurisdictions there are in the Caribbean, but you have, say, Dominica, St. Lucia, Guadeloupe, all next to each other. But for you as an investor, have to deal with completely different laws. Dominica and St. Lucia, they're part of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. They have similar origins, but it doesn't mean that their regulations have anything in common at all. And then you go one island across to Guadeloupe, while you're in the European Union, you're in France. And again, you have to deal with a whole different set of conditions. So when you're talking about markets that may have a few 100,000, sometimes less than 100,000 people in, you often just don't have the scale. On the flip side, for ESG investors, there's an opportunity to have some big impact, because you can see really, you can make changes on a national level with relatively small projects. But the big barrier is more the political and social factors often than it is the economics.
No, that makes a ton of sense. I, of course, am here in Florida, and I love the Caribbean. So I'd love to touch on the Caribbean from that standpoint. Could you maybe mention an island that is very forward thinking in the Caribbean, and as sort of a case study of where maybe some of the other islands could take some lessons?
I don't think there's one island that has solved everything. There are different areas. So, for example, if you want to talk about electric vehicles, you look at Barbados. And often, because we're talking on a smaller scale, there may be a handful of actors that have really pushed it. So there's particularly there's one dealership in Barbados that has really pushed that, been forward thinking, worked, and now they're even looking on a national level at moving. I'm not sure where this project is, but there was talk of moving all of the buses to electrified buses. There's some similar things happening in Bermuda. In several other islands, there are big goals for renewables. So, for example, Jamaica, which is one of the much larger islands with close to 4 million people, there's a goal for 50% renewable energy by 2030, which is ambitious but realistic. And so you see these kind of different things happening in different places. I've talked a lot about Puerto Rico, which is a very interesting example. Also, there have been a lot of really exciting things that have happened and been talked about in Puerto Rico. I'm not sure where those things are currently with the grid, because the electricity grid in Puerto Rico is a very difficult, complicated story. So the thing with the Caribbean is every island is so different. Aruba in the previous government had these really big goals for 100% renewables. Those didn't happen. The government changed, things moved on. But I think Aruba is still around a third of the electricity generated from renewables, primarily due to a large solar farm at the airport and a large wind farm on the north coast. And in general, we're seeing kind of a slow but steady trend towards more and more renewables across the region.
Now, very cool. So, I can't talk about the Caribbean without mentioning Sir Richard Branson, of course, right? So he's a big player in the British Virgin Islands, as you know. But I think I've seen him involved with some other sort of renewable developers in the region. I wonder if you've come across him at all, or if you've encountered his sort of work in the Caribbean.
Yes, Richard Branson has been a big advocate and actually owns a company, BMR Renewables, which is an investor and developer around the region. Has got several projects, I think, in Jamaica, Central America, some other islands. So there's not only the kind of the NGO nonprofit side, but he's also actually involved in investment and doing business in the region. There have been several initiatives like the Caribbean Climate Accelerator, which was supported from one of the Branson organizations. I lose track of all the different initiatives that the Virgin touches. And of course, in the Virgin Isles, I believe his island is pretty much fully renewable as well. So yeah, we did hear a lot. There were some big events like the Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum, which was kind of the region's annual conference that would take place, and he did show up to a couple of those as well. But then there's also a lot of Caribbean stakeholders that are really pushing this on different levels as well, and in different countries. The challenge is that the region is so, I guess, fragmented politically. You have the independent countries, the Spanish-speaking countries, there's all the different languages spoken, that there's just so many different things happening around the region. It's very difficult to make any generalizations because, of course, the Virgin Islands and Haiti are completely different contexts, for example.
Yeah, no question about that. So well, let's change tracks a little bit. Of course, when I think of islands, a lot of people don't realize the biggest island in the world is Indonesia, right? So it's an island nation of I think about 250 million people. It's a big, one of the largest countries in the world. Um, have you had any experience over there? Have you worked with any of, let's say, the larger islands like Indonesia or similar large islands?
So we tend to focus on a group called Small Island Developing States, which make up around just over a fifth of UN members, but only around 2% of the global population. So a lot of countries, but relatively small population. The biggest region for that is the Caribbean, but also the South Pacific and parts of Africa and the Indian Ocean as well. So those are jurisdictions are kind of very there's a lot of things happening in those jurisdictions. But of course, if we want to think about large island countries, well, I'm from the UK, which people forget has over 100 inhabited islands, not just the big island, Great Britain. And so I actually, sideline, I did my master's in island studies, believe it or not, at a university in the far north of Scotland, looking at how to do development in those regions. And so part of the interest for me is, well, actually, if you look at an electricity or a grid system, it doesn't matter whether you're in the north of Scotland or the Caribbean, your problems are talking about scale and looking at uh, looking at the conditions are similar, I guess. Clearly, you may be looking at a bit more solar in the Caribbean than you are in Scotland. But yeah, we've I mean, to go back to your original question, Indonesia, the Philippines, other countries that have islands. I mean, even India has two archipelagos that are part of Indian territory. We have those included in our network. And for us, what's been really important is, as well as engaging the island states, to also engage with islands that fall in this gray area between being semi-sovereign. So again, Puerto Rico is a good example. The British Virgin Islands are a good example. Kind of semi-autonomous island regions, and then other islands that fall in as part of them. So we have islands in Maine with a few hundred people that are part of our network as well. So there's a whole range of different places. But wherever you are, whatever island you are in the world, electricity is a big issue.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. So I'd like to transition maybe into just some more personal questions as far as um, who's had a big impact on you as a mentor in terms of influencing. What caused you to go into this sort of island direction? Because I've actually never heard of masters in island studies, for example. I mean, I wish I would have known about it. I might have gone that track because it sounds like a really fun thing to do, get to see the world. But who mentored you to sort of drive you in that direction, or what influenced you?
So my original interest was rural development and renewable energy were kind of two of my core interests. I grew up on a farm in the English countryside, and so I always had this kind of that level of interest. And then I was lucky enough to spend some time in California working in the solar energy sector in the Bay Area. And one of the people there that really influenced me is Danny Kennedy, an Australian guy, founded Sungevity, now runs the New Energy Nexus. I forget, there's been multiple organizations that he's been involved with, and a really big advocate for renewable. So he was one of the people that really kind of gave me the initial interest in renewables. And actually through him, I got involved with a project called Solar Head of State, which worked with several island leaders. And one of the projects that we did was with the President Mohammed Nasheed in the Maldives, who was also a huge influence in terms of like looking at islands, how islands can lead and make striking examples on this. So there's a film called The Island President, if you haven't seen it, all about Mohammed Nasheed and the work that he did to promote the Maldives. And then another would be Christine Milne, more recently, who was a former leader of the Australian Green Party, a Tasmania and senator for Tasmania, and a huge advocate not only for her island of Tasmania, but also islands across the Pacific, and kind of changing Australia's role and relationship when it comes to those islands and pushing a green agenda. And I think, various different people have influenced this. But what has been really interesting to me is also that through this network, we connect with so many people on the doing small projects on the local level as well. Um, Someone who comes to mind who's a real inspiration for me on the island of Montserrat in the Caribbean, Veta Wade, who is very much focused on her island, 5 or 6 thousand people, but changing the relationship of people there with the ocean. And as a scuba diver, and looking that often many people of African origin in the Caribbean have had a difficult relationship with the ocean, and in many cases have not were not even taught to swim. And changing that narrative and changing that relationship as islanders, and seeing the ocean and appreciating that, I think that is really admirable. So yeah, a whole range of different people have contributed to this in different islands around the world.
Those are great stories. Really cool. Now, we don't want to offend anybody, but I must ask, okay, of all the islands that you've been to, I'm sure there's many, many beautiful ones, but which one, if money were no object, which island would you put your flag in and live on?
Well, I can't have favorites, of course, in this job, but one place I have spent a lot of time and I have a really deep affection for is Jamaica. Jamaica is such an incredible place with such amazing people and so much that I think often um, is not appreciated by people who even just go on holiday there and don't get outside the resorts. And I do think for a relatively small country, if you think about the cultural impact that that island has had on the world, not just in music, but obviously music being the big one that people know, but beyond that, in terms of food and other aspects as well. I think Jamaica is somewhere that's really, really, really special to me, and I do like. The other one would be Orkney in the north of Scotland. So slightly different temperature. Not sure I could live there in the cold, but somewhere I've spent a bit of time. And Orkney is the home of the European Marine Energy Centre, one of the pioneers in Europe for looking at the role of renewables and really implementing some innovative energy projects.
Very cool, very cool. What would you say in the last year? Have there been any books that you've read or anything that you've learned in particular that's been sort of stand out that you've come across in the last year?
You're putting me on the spot here. Well, I feel like I'm always learning. We have looking at different things. One interesting book that I just finished, so that's at the top of my mind. Um, I'm completely forgetting the name of it now. Was it talking about the idea of diversity, which obviously we hear about diversity a lot now without actually interrogating what that means and thinking about how we get diversity of thought. This has really been a big influence for me and my business and how we've built our team, how we get people with different ideas, and also not just it's not just about having people represented who have a range of different backgrounds and experiences, but then how you actually implement those ideas and make sure that people can work together and collaborate. And the reason that that has been important for me is that our team is spread out. We were fully remote before the pandemic. And so we have people in Africa, in Europe, in South America, the Caribbean, the US, and all of these different people come together, and that is a really big opportunity because people have very different backgrounds, very different ideas. But it can also be challenging because sometimes you are coming at things from such different ideas that you can miss things. So I need to look up the name of the book because it's just completely gone out of my mind as we're talking about this. But for me as a business owner, that's been a useful way of changing my way of thinking about how we incorporate all different diverse range of ideas.
No, that's great, James. And I'll get the name of the book from you and we'll put it in the notes for the podcast. So that way people could look it up. And I totally feel your pain because I'm reading all these great books and I'm the same. I forget the names a lot of times. I remember the concepts, but it's difficult sometimes to remember the names of all these different books. Um, well, I think I'd like to end with just something of all the projects that you've worked on, either whether it's financially or in terms of impact. Which project would you say that you've been the most proud of?
Good question. Um, I think so. As Island Innovation, we've built an ambassador network. So it's not a project. It's not nothing in the ground. It's not a physical project, but we've built this network, and our ambassadors, particularly, we have 400 people in that network now who are involved in this program, contributing, sharing, and we give them training to help them implement change in their communities and to help bring about these conversations on sustainable development in all its forms. And I think that network is such an interesting mix of people, from local councillors to business owners, university students and professors, and government officials. But that that trying to build these digital bridges for me has been really interesting. And what has happened, in the last year, a lot of people have obviously for obvious reasons got used to using Zoom and this kind of remote collaboration. But for me, that's kind of how we were already working. And so to be able to see, I guess, the opportunity there, that's obviously going to change as we go back to normal, whatever that means, has been very, very interesting. So I think, yeah, it's not a tangible project as such, but this diverse network of people that can collaborate and work together in a way that leads to real change on the ground, I think has been exciting.
No, that's great. Let's end with if people listening to this want to get in touch with you, what are the kinds of people that should reach out and how can they get a hold of you?
So we have a big event called the Virtual Island Summit taking place in September. It's free to attend. We had over 10,000 people register last year. And if you're interested in any of these topics, there'll be a whole range of things, all different angles of sustainable development. You can just join one or two sessions that are most relevant to you. So if you go to islandinnovation.co, you can sign up, learn more about that. We also have a weekly newsletter that is a summary of island energy, island sustainability and energy stories from around the world. So you can just see different things happening in different places, and you can sign up to that on our website as well, or look me up or Island Innovation up on Twitter and send us a message to say that you listen to this.
Great. James, it's been a pleasure having you. James Ellsmoor, Island Innovation. Great talk today. A lot of insights, a unique perspective that a lot of people, I don't think, can fully appreciate how maybe if we look at islands, we can see the future of energy. So, James, thanks for taking the time. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
For more energy superheroes with Peter Perry, visit Energy.Media.